All right. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Taanis Daf Lamed. We are learning the second to last Daf in this Masechta. We left off actually on Daf Chavtes, Amid Beis, 3 lines from the top of the Amid. We began on Daf Chavtes Amid Aleph towards the end of the Amid, quoting a statement from the Amoira, Amar Rav Yehuda, Bereider Rav Shmuel, Bar Shilas Mishmei Rav, Kishem. As we learned in our Mishnah, that when the month of Av comes in, we have to diminish B'simcha. Kach Mishenichnas Adar Marbim B'simcha. So we're going to have now 2 other quotes from this same Amoira, from Rav Yehuda Bereider Rav Shmuel, Bar Shmilas Mishmei Rav, and then we will start, and the entire daf will be concerning the Avelus, the mourning connected to Tisha B'Av. So just a couple of topics that we're going to be touching upon. Number 1, laundering clothing on the Shabbos Shachal by Tisha B'Av, on the week that is Tisha B'Av, which is something that one may not do. The question will be, is it that you may not do it to wear those laundered clothing before Tisha B'Av? But what about if I'm going to launder the clothing, lehaniach, to put them away, only to use them after Tisha B'Av? Is that something permitted or not? We'll see that that's a machlokes that we're going to have in the Gemara. Another question, Shabbos Shachal by Tisha B'Av. Are the restrictions only prior to Tisha B'Av? What happens if Tisha B'Av, for example, is on a Wednesday? So what happens Thursday? What happens Friday? Well, you can argue it's the week Shachal by Tisha B'Av. But on the other hand, it's already after Tisha B'Av. We're going to see that that's really subject to a machlokes amoraim, and actually we're going to discover that that's subject to a machlokes tanoim. We're going to quote the machlokes tanoim regarding something beyond Shabbos Shachal by Tisha B'Av. We're going to learn Shitas Rabbi Meir, and so is the custom of us. So we paskin, we meaning the Ashkenazim, that these restrictions don't only begin on the week Shabbos Shachal by Tisha B'Av. They actually begin from Rosh Chodesh Menachemov. That will be the first topic. The other topic of today's daf, really beginning on Daf Lamed and going onwards, is going to be many rules regarding what we call the Su'udas Hamafsekas, which is the meal, the last meal eaten before the fast of Tisha B'Av, the meal through which we conclude eating and we get ready for the fast. We're going to have a concept that since you are having, so to say, your last meal before the fast, you are already by default undertaking upon yourself at least some other laws of mourning. For example, washing. There are those who hold that from the Su'udas Hamafsekas onwards, you may not wash yourself at all. Others argue. And another beautiful topic will be, as we are familiar with, there are many parts of Torah that one may not learn on Tisha B'Av. We actually begin with those restrictions. Our minig is Erev Tisha B'Av from midday. But let's begin learning about that, the restrictions of learning Torah on Tisha B'Av, according to Rashi, connected to the fact that learning Torah adds to one's joy. B'kudei Hashem yisharim misamchei leiv. Question will be, what about learning those parts of the Torah that I am not yet familiar with? In other words, or better, those parts of Torah which for me learning them is very difficult. We're going to see that there's a machlokes. Many people hold you can learn that because we are familiar with that feeling. You try to learn something, if you're not yet accustomed to it, so then you're going to have a lot of tzar. At least we should have tzar. You open up a Gemara, you open up a Maimer, and you don't chap it. So that doesn't bring you joy, that brings you pain. Some people hold that you are allowed to learn it. Others hold it brings you pain, but it also brings you joy. And it is the joy aspect of it that won't allow you to learn that on Tisha B'Av, and much, much more. Daf Chavtes Amid Beis, 3 lines from the top of the Amid, says the Gemara. Again, this is all quotations from Rav Yehuda Bereider Rav Shmuel Bar Shilas Mishmei Rav, that when it says in Yirmiyah, Law says lochem achris v'tikva, that Hashem will give us future and hope. Now, this is a Gavaldike insight. This pasuk was written concerning the Jews that went into Galus Bavel, that they will have hope, they will have a future with the knowledge that Galus Bavel, like every Galus, is temporary. And ultimately, we're getting out of Galus. That's the pshat. The drasha is phenomenal. The drasha here is that even while we were in Galus, God put us to Bavel, And there was something there in Golus that was to our benefit, and that is Amar Rav Yehuda Bereider Rav Shmuel Bar Shilo Shmei Rav Elu Dekolim Uklei Pishtim. That Bavel has a lot of date trees. In Bavel, it was common for people to wear linen garments. These are very durable garments that are made out of linen, last much longer than the garments that were then made out of wool. And date trees, as we continuously learned, were in abundance in Bavel. Dates are very nutritious. So even in Golus, when it comes to the pnimius of taking in, when it comes to Makev HaKarev, we went to a location where there was a abundant and durable supply of the above. That was God's gift in Golus itself. And the third statement is based on a pasuk in Talmud, where it says that this is when Yaakov walked into his father Yitzchak. Yitzchak did not know which child walked in. Right? Akol kol Yaakov Hayidayim de Yosef. And Vayomer Re'ei Reach B'ni. See, or I see that the scent of my son is Kereach Sada, is like the scent of the field. Asher Beirachai Hashem, the field that God blessed, which means it smells like Gan Eden. So here, Amar Rav Yehuda Bereider Rav Shmuel Bar Shilo Shmei Rav, what does the field of Gan Eden smell like? Kereach Sada Shel Tapuchen. It smelled like literally an apple orchard. Says Tosfos. Many people are familiar with this from Rashi and Chumash. Look inside Tosfos. If you never heard this, you're going to fall off your seat. Shal tapuchem yesh mefarshim. Tapuchem means kereach esroigim. In other words, since this is another sugya, what was the Eitz Hadas Toivara? Really, we have throughout Chazal 4 opinions. One of them is that the Eitz Hadas was esroigim. So when Adam and Chava partook from those esroigim, the reyach of those fruits of Gan Eden went into his garments. And this is exactly what he smelled. How amazing is that? That lahavdol, the goyim completely have it wrong. In other words, the Eitz Hadas, right? They always have that. They have the apple. They have it as an apple. We know that that's wrong. That's a mistake. Chazal never say apple. It was either a wheat, and the wheat and the kernels were mamish like bread. It's before the sin, you didn't have to make bread. The bread grew off the tree, and they were big and juicy and fresh. The other shita is it was a grape. The other shita was it was a fig. That's why Hashem made garments to Adam and Chava. Adam made garments from the leaves of that tree, connected to the fig, and the fourth shita was an esrik.
The coat is the same coat that Esav got from
that's the coat. That's the coat. The coat that Esav got from Nimrod. That's the same coat that he ultimately stole it. Nimrod. And it came all the way from Adam. That was a garment that had in it the smell of the esrogim. Now the question on this that it was absorbed is that l'chayra he ate before he was garbed. So that means the reach went so much into his body that when after Hashem made him garments, the reich went into the garment. But it's very interesting to know the shita that a tapuach sometimes can be referring to an esreg. How great. All right, Chevra, may we be yoitza all of the morning in our life by learning these sugyas. Amen. That's it. Says the Gemara, referring back to the Mishnah, that Shabbos shechal Tisha B'Av liyois b'soichem. Shabbos here means the week in which Tisha B'Av falls, then you have additional restrictions, and that is asurim l'sapid, one may not take a haircut, nor ulachabis, launder clothing. Just to appreciate that laundering clothing was a real big avoida in those days. It changed so much now that we have washing machines, and in America we have dryers. It wasn't that way. Laundering was a big avoida. People did not launder clothing, nothing near as much as we launder it right now. Now, on one hand, you can argue doing a lot of work is not taking away your mourning. Joy, pleasure, tainug is against mourning. Wasn't that? It was that when the clothing are laundered and you wear them, there was a tremendous amount of simcha. That means if a person would live in a society where the clothing generally were not clean, and laundering clothing, wow, you put a nice, freshly laundered clothing, like a big yichus. Here people change their clothing twice a day. So that was something that was prohibited. So Amar Rav Nachman, here we go. First machlekes Amorai. Loishanu, this prohibition is only lechabes v'lilbosh, only to launder clothing, to wear them. In other words, the issur is to wear them. Actually, we're going to learn later, It's not about the laundering, it's about wearing it. We don't wear new clothing. That is what's usher. The tainug of I'm wearing newly light clothing. But if I'm doing the hard work, but I'm not going to wear the clothing, Shabbos, Shabbat, Tisha B'Av, I'm only going to put it away. So what's wrong with that? Mutter, you're not going against mourning. Rab Sheisha says, no, because the knowledge that you have in your drawer freshly laundered clothing, that alone gives you a certain amount of joy, if you can say, or of pleasure, which is not consistent with the feelings that one should have connected to Tisha B'Av. Now, that's a machlekes. So Amar Rab Sheisha is Teida, I'll prove it to you, that it's even asur lohaniach, that the batlei katzrei debei Rav, that the people, the launderers that worked in the household of Rav did not work. Now think about it. If you are paying workers, and the issur is only not to wear freshly laundered clothing, it was a big work to go launder, to find a body of water and to go there and it was cold and to launder and to squeeze it out. The spin cycle was all manual, hands. Then to dry it, if you're paying workers, why would they not work? If you are allowed to wash it and to put it in the closet, lohaniach. The fact that they were bottle is a raya that you can't even wash it, lohaniach. That's a great raya. By the way, katzrei, which means launderers, Rashi says something amazing. Katzrei literally means making little. When you launder, Rashi says when you would launder garments, we know that it shrunk. So they would call launderers the shrinkers. They ruin your garments. They make it every time you wash it, it got smaller. Okay. That's a raya from Rab Sheisha. That's not from a Tana, but from the behavior of the household of the great Rav. Mosiv, Rav Hamnuna. Now this is going to be a kasha against Rav Nachman from a Brais. It says, from our Mishnah. It says in our Mishnah, Bachamishi, we learned Rashi when we learned the Mishnah. Bachamishi means that when Tisha B'Av falls on Friday, says the Mishnah that Thursday, which is amazing, which is Erev Tisha B'Av, Mutarim, you are allowed to launder clothing, the Pnei Kavod Shabbos. Now, Frek Gemara Lamai, Ilema L'Chabes V'Lilboish. Does the Mishnah mean that you can wash it to wear it on Thursday? That's not Kavod Shabbos. That should be awesome. There's no Kavod Shabbos. Kavod Shabbos means to wear it for Shabbos. Elot must be Lohaniach. That when Tisha B'Av falls on Friday, since you don't have time after Tisha B'Av to get to launder, to have fresh clothing for Shabbos, that is when you can wash it before Tisha B'Av to wear it for Shabbos. Elohaniach. And only ubechamishi hu deshari, because since Tisha B'Av falls on Friday, you don't have time to do it after. Avol ha-Shabbos kula. Shabbos kula means the whole week. Then also, that means that if Tisha B'Av falls out on any other day of the week, washing your clothing before Tisha B'Av, even if you're only going to wear it after Tisha B'Av, is also asur. Mamash gavaldik. That's l'chayra kasha against Rav Nachman. So answers the Gemara L'Olam that when Tisha B'Av falls on Friday, and the Mishnah says that you can launder your clothing on Thursday, it means you can launder it and wear it on Thursday. To launder it, to wear it after Tisha B'Av, you can always do that. Why would someone launder the clothing and wear it on Thursday, l'chavat Shabbos? He says gavaldik. What happens if a person only has one set of clothing? That's your only shirt. And if when you have one set of clothing, the norm was you would wash it once a week. Can't wash it on Friday. Friday's Tisha B'Av. So that's what the Mishnah is saying. Now, this guy would wash it on Thursday and wear it on Thursday. He has no other shirt. But it's called Kavod Shabbos because when else will he do it for Shabbos? Normally, he would wash things on Friday to wear it for Shabbos. Here, he's washing it one day early. Even though normally on Chol HaMoed you may not launder clothing. Same thing over here. But Lohaniach, Rav Nachman stands his grounds is something that you are allowed to do no matter when Tisha B'Av falls out. If you are only washing it to wear it later, that's not a problem. The issur is to wear the freshly garment clothing. And now that we did not refute Rav Nachman, actually, the Gemara is going to back up Rav Nachman. Itmanami Amar Rebbe Binyamin, Amar Rav Elazar. The issur of laundering clothing is Ela L'Chabes V'Lilbash. Now, Meisvei, now the kasha is going to be against Rebbe Binyamin and against Rav Nachman. Says in a brayso that also L'Chabes Lifnei Tisha B'Av. Afilu lahaniach la'achar Tisha B'Av. Boomba. That's what happens so often, that Amoraim did not have access to all these braises. That's going to refute it. They found this braisa, and Amoraim cannot argue with this. And by the way, that's the halacha today. Now let's finish it. That refutes Rav Nachman. That refutes Rabbi Yamin. But let's finish learning the braisa. Another din. The issue is laundering it to make the clothing feel like it's new. So the Braisa says that giyutz shalanu, when in Bavel, they knew how to make clothing fresh in Bavel by not only laundering it, but then they would press it. Then it was ready to wear, like beautiful. So the Braisa says that here in Bavel, when our garments new, when you washed it and you did giyutz. Giyutz means you press them. As we all know, that certain garments, depending how you wash it, become so crinkled or wrinkled. If you don't then press it, even though it's clean, but it doesn't feel clean. It's like not good. So Abraisa says that giyutz shalanu kichibu shalohen. Lamai nafkamina, there's many nafkaminas. I'm not going to go into for dinim of avelis. Now, another din, ukli pishtan, ein bahem mishum giyutz. In other words, the isur against pressing clothing doesn't apply to klei pishtan, because klei pishtan will never look new. So perhaps so there's no problem with pressing linen garments because you don't make them look new anyway. And the problem is all about new. Like today, we don't buy garments. Then for sure, they never bought garments. Because the simcha that you're having by buying, by acquiring, and certainly by wearing a new garment. Point is that this Braisa clearly writes that the isur of laundering isn't only to launder and to wear it, it's even to launder lohaniach. So to Yufta, indeed, this refutes Rav Nachman, this refutes Rabbi Binyamin. And so we paskin, says the Gemara, the end of the narrow line, Shalach Rabbi Yitzchak bar Giyure, in the name of Rabbi Yechanan, Afa Pisha Amru, Klei Pishtan Ein, Vahem Mishum Giyutz. Right? So therefore you would think, basically what we're saying is that washing, and therefore washing it with and pressing it, you're not violating the issue of laundering and pressing it because you didn't make a garment fresh. It doesn't look fresh. Nevertheless, you can't wear it. So you can do it. So now that we established that doing it, even lohaniach, is asur. Klei pishtan, to clean it and to press it, is mutter, not to wear it. Mutter lohaniach. Avol asur leloif sham b'Shabbos shechal Tisha B'Av liyos b'toicham. Gewaldig. Okay. Now, okay. Omar Rav. Now, there's a whole machlokes as to whether Rav is continuing the sugya, whether Rav is beginning a new topic. And let's learn this sugya that Rav is beginning a new topic. And the new topic is going to be regarding Shabbos shechal liyos Tisha B'Av b'toicham. All of these restrictions that we learned in the Mishnah, do they only apply to before Tisha B'Av? Like if Tisha B'Av is on Wednesday, Shabbos of Tisha B'Av, you can't lasaper, lachabes, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, because Tisha B'Av is. Or what about the days of the week after Tisha B'Av? Now we know from our halacha, we do take most of the restrictions to even after Tisha B'Av, but only to the 10th to Chatzos. That evolved from this sugya. Our Gemara B'chlal won't mention such an option, of that it goes a little bit after Tisha B'Av, connected to what we learned yesterday, that the Beis HaMikdash really burned Be'ikar on the 10th of Av. That's not connected to our sugya. Here it's beginning with the simple. Shabbos affects the whole week, or Shabbos only means before Tisha B'Av. That's the machlokes we have here, Amoraim, and really machlokes Tanoim. So Amarav, Lo Yishanu Ela Lefanav. All of these prohibitions are only before Tisha B'Av. Avo la'achrav muter. Everything, all of these restrictions, it's after Tisha B'Av already. However, Shmuel is machmer, and he says, "Afilu la'achrav nami yasser." So you may not launder clothing on Shabbos, shechal Tisha B'Av liyos b'toicha. If Tisha B'Av is on Sunday, so what? So you can't launder. You cannot launder Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Okay. Meisvein kasha against Shmuel, the machmer says in a brayso, Shabbos shechal Tisha B'Av liyos b'toicha. Also, lesaper ulachabes, and like we had on our Mishnah, but if Tisha B'Av falls on Friday, then on On Thursday, you are allowed to launder clothing b'pnei kavod Shabbos, as we just explained above, right? That, for example, you only have one shirt, you washed it and you put it back on. You can wash it and put it back on Thursday because you would wash it once a week. You can't do it on Friday, so you can do it on Thursday. Ketzad, here the Bryce. It fits exactly with the Mishnah. This is exactly what we learned in the Mishnah. Now, Ketzad chal liyos be'echad b'Shabbos. If Tisha B'Av falls on a Sunday, says the Braisa, muter lechabes kol haShabbos kula. Kol haShabbos kula, guys. The whole week obviously doesn't mean Sunday. It means after Tisha B'Av. Fakir, that's this machlokes. So Shabbos Chaliyas Tisha B'Av v'Toichai is restricted, but only before Tisha B'Av. If Tisha B'Av falls on Sunday, so from Monday onwards you can do whatever, you can launder. Or if Tisha B'Av falls on Monday, or if it falls on Shlishi, you get it? Or if Tisha B'Av falls on Wednesday, or if Tisha B'Av falls on Thursday. No, it doesn't matter when it falls. The prohibitions are only lefanav asur, la'achrav muter. This is befedish against Shmuel.
So on Sunday you do one day?
On Sunday, there's only Sunday. Only That's this whole topic. And by the way, we pass in this way. We just have a minute. We're machmer that we go into the next day until Chatzos.
Right.
But before that, Shabbos doesn't mean the whole week. It means the whole week before Tisha B'Av. Chal liyos be'erev Shabbos, and even here there's an exception. That if Tisha B'Av falls on a Friday, there's nothing after Friday. Shabbos we can't launder. Isur schita v'chulei. So mutar l'chabes b'chamishim epnei kavod Shabbos. Furthermore, listen to this. Imagine Tisha B'Av is on Friday. Now let's go again. That we're speaking about a person that only has one shirt. You only have one pants. You forgot to do it on Thursday. You can wash that garment on Tisha B'Av, but after midday because of Kavod Shabbos. Muter lechabes be'erev Shabbos min mincha l'mayla. Okay, it's not erev Shabbos after mincha l'mayla. Does mincha l'mayla mean mincha gedola? Does it mean mincha ketana? Say machlokes in the Rishonim. And now we interrupt the Braisa by Abaye saying, "Layit Allah Abayim." Abaye cursed. Strong expression. Or Rav Acha bar Yaakov cursed. Aha. On someone who's going to end up laundering the clothing on Tisha B'Av, even though it's min chol. Don't do that. But theoretically, you are allowed to do that. Back to the Bryce. By the way, this Bryce already clearly refutes Shmuel. Again, let's finish reading the Bryce. Another detail, if Tisha B'Av falls on Monday and Thursday, on Mondays and Thursday, but as we already learned that the earlier Nevi'im, according to the Rambam, Moshe Rabbeinu was misaken that we should not go 3 days without reading Torah. Right, and many years later, Ezra HaSefer was misaken to learn to read the Torah on Mincha Shabbos because of the Yoshek Faranas. He didn't want for you to have a whole Shabbos afternoon without having some content. So he wanted people to come back to shul. That was many years later. That's why a shul should not do Mincha after Kiddush. It goes against the whole spirit of what Ezra wanted. Ezra wanted that when you go home, you should have in your mind, you have to come back to shul.
Before they were doing a daf review and shiur Rabbah on Shabbos section anyway.
So correct. Before all that, now they wouldn't have to do that. The point, he wanted people to come back to shul. But anyways, coming back over here, we read Torah 3 times a week: Shabbos, Mondays, and Thursdays. Now we read Torah in a way that 3 days don't pass without reading Torah, and we're going to learn this also in Megillah. How much do we read there? We read. We're going to see at least 10 psukim, calling up 3 people. This whole sugya that during the week 3 people, and Chalamoid 4 people, and Yom Tov 5 people, and then Yom Kippur 6 people, and Shabbos 7 people. That whole sugya. So he writes something very interesting. That if Tisha B'Av falls on Sheni v'Chamishi, anyways, these are days in which you call up 3 people, even though the Kriya is not the same Kriya. The Kriya is from Parshas V'Eschanan. But how much do you read calling up 3 people? Now we know that on Tisha B'Av, even by Shachris, we say Mafter, Soilu, Soilu, Sola, Sola. So v'Chamisha Koidem, Shloisho Mafter Echad. So you give Mafter, but you don't call a 4th person. You stick to the 3 people being called up, which is what we do. However, the chiddush of this Tana is that we're not familiar with, that if Tisha B'Av falls either on Shlishi or Uberevi, and by the way, it's not only Shlishi and Avi, it means also on Sunday, also on Friday, if it falls on a weekday, that if it not for Tisha B'Av, we Bechlal would not have read the Torah. You know what this Braisa says? Koire echad umaftir echad. There's only one person called to the Torah, and that's the person that reads Maftir. However, Rabbi Yossi disagrees with that, and we paskin like Rabbi Yossi that lo'olam koidem shloisha. We never take out the Torah to only call up one person. but this is a good trivia question that most people won't know how to answer. Like, we don't paskin this way, but there's a Tana. Like, when do we take out the Torah only to call one person? According to the Chachamim, on Tisha B'Av, Shachal, Sunday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Friday. El Mafterecha. But okay, end of Braisa. Point is, the Braisa clearly says against Shmuel that you can, all of the restrictions of Tisha B'Av end with Tisha B'Av. They don't go to the whole Shabbos to Yufta de Shmuel. Amar Lach Shmuel, you are right. This Braisa clearly says other than what I said, but it's not. I'm not standing alone. Machlekes Tanoim, and I have the right to paskin like the other Tana. The Tanya. Braisa number 2, Tisha B'Av Shechaliyas B'Shabbos. We're going to learn 3 opinions here, and I'll cup over here. Tisha B'Av that falls out B'Shabbos. What do we do, guys? Here, Shabbos doesn't mean in the week. When do we fast?
Sunday.
Shkoyach, Sunday. Or if Tisha B'Av falls out on Shabbos, no, it's the 9th of Av is on Shabbos. When do we fast? Sunday. No matter when we fast on Sunday, whether Sunday is Boy Yom Tisha B'Av or whether it's a Nitcha, says the Braisa, Oichel. Now this Braisa is going to move on to Su'udas HaMafsekes, which will be the topic that we're going to learn on Daf Lamed. But what do we do? Oichel, the Shoyse Kol Tzorchoi, Umayla Al Shulchanoi, that there are no restrictions, my friends, even when it comes to the final meal, what we call Su'udas HaMafsekes, even though we learned in the Mishnah about the restrictions on that meal. No meat, no wine, no two cooked dishes. None of that applies when you're doing the Su'udas HaMafsekes on Shabbos, because Shabbos Kodesh. And afilu k'su'uda shloima b'shaitoi. Shloima b'shaitoi is because we had that sugya where King Solomon was kicked out of his being king by Ashmedai. That is shloima shaloi b'shaitoi. Then he wasn't wealthy. But even when Shloima during his reign, where he was Shloima HaMelech, where he feasted, you can eat that much. Another din. V'asur l'saper ulachabes. Now we're learning something new. Now let me ask you a question, Shlomo. When is Shabbos Chal Tisha B'Av? When is Shabbos? When is that week? If you're fasting on Sunday, when is that week? Tell me. So David is saying there's no week. Anachanami. If the Isur would only begin on the week of Tisha B'Av, there is no Shabbos Chal Niyas Tisha B'Av. So now we are introducing Rab Meir, and the Ashkenazim, we follow Rab Meir. That really these restrictions begins from Rosh Chodesh. So for Asur l'saper ulachabes, this is, by the way, this is not only when we fast on Sunday. B'chlal, all of these restrictions begins Rosh Chodesh va'ad Taanis. Now, what does it say clearly, guys? Va'ad Taanis. Clearly. Like, by the way, that's like the Braisa above. Once the fast is over, Me'ikar Adin Nigmar, the morning. These are the words of Rab Meir. Now, Rab Yehuda Oimer, Kol HaChodesh Kula Yasur. Oh my gosh. Let me tell you, Yaakov is looking at me, how we can use this in the positive. Because the sugya began on top of the Amud, that just like Mishanichnas Av Mematim, Kach Mishanichnas Ador Marbin. The Rebbe emphasized that. People should not think that the Marbin only goes until Purim. Ador. That is the Zelu Umazeh that's corresponding to the sheet of Rabbi Yehuda. Because he's saying that Av doesn't only mean until the day of the fast. It's the whole month. That's a heavy din. And in Mamish, Kol HaChodesh Kula Yasser. How do you survive with Kinderlach without laundering a whole month? I have no idea. But at least be consistent. And by Adar, he also emphasized the need of rejoicing the whole month. Now Rashbag will be now the base of Shmuel. Rashbag Oimer, Einoi Osur Ela Oisa Shabbos Bilvad. But Taich, you know what Oisa Shabbos Bilvad means? That entire week. Not like Rav Meir that it begins from Rosh Chodesh. Not like Rabbi Yehuda that it goes until Rosh Chodesh Elul. Not. But that week, the whole week. The whole week means even after the fast. Shmuel is based on Ashbag. Very good. Now, for Tanya, Idog, the Noyag Evel means because we're only focusing on the issue, let's say, of taking a haircut or even laundering clothing. There are other isurim, not taking haircuts. We have isurim, we are not allowed to listen to music. That's the real isur over here. And can you get married? Can you get engaged? All of the dinei avelos, the same machlokes over here. From when does it begin? So now we know it's really a three-way machlokes tanoim. Rav Meir holds that all of the avelos begins Rosh Chodesh, but at that time is the Rav Meir. Meresh Chodesh v'ad Taanis, not after the Taanis. Even Shvuah Shechalbon. Tisha B'Av was on Tuesday. After Tuesday, Me'ikar Adin, there's no more Avelus. More or less the way we do. We have a minute to go into the 10th day. But it begins with Rosh Chodesh. Rabbi Yehuda says, Kol HaChodesh Kulei Asur. Not only laundering. No, it's all of the Dinei Avelus. The heaviest Avelus that we do during what we call the 9 days. And Ashbag Oimed, Eino Asur Elo Oisa Shabbos Bulvad. But again, Oisa Shabbos, on one hand, he's limiting it. It doesn't begin with Rosh Chodesh. It doesn't go until Rosh Chodesh Elul. But Oisa Shabbos means, like Shmuel said, the ganze Woche. It says in Hosea that during this terrible time of the year, during the sad time of the year, I will bring, right, all her joy to an end. There's going to be a shvisa from Mesoisa, from joy. But now listen to this. You have 3 statements. What's the joy? Chaga, her festivals. Chacha means her months. You have to know Pashat how to teach. And Vishapsa. So what's meintas? So here we go. Man the Amar Meresh Chodesh v'ad Taanis. Who's that? Rabbi Meir Daf Lamed. He emphasizes the words Meichaga. Now, why? Because Chag is Rosh Chodesh. If you ask, what's the Chag in Menachem Av? Rosh Chodesh, there's no other Chag. Even though we're going to learn in the Mishnah about Tubav and Achanami. But don't forget that Rav Meir holds that all of the Dinei Avelus, the Hishbati, Kol Mesoisa, only goes until Tisha B'Av. So until Tisha B'Av, what Chag do you have? In other words, even, that's the whole thing. People say, even on Rosh Chodesh. Even the dinim, what we call the 9 days, includes Rosh Chodesh. We don't get a free pass. It's Rosh Chodesh, we can go party. Not Svardim, very good. That's Mamash, Ashkenazim. B'diyuk. They go from Shabbos Chaliyas Tisha B'Av. B'diyuk. But if I'm not mistaken, the Svardim don't go like Rashbag the whole week. They also end their morning by Tisha B'Av. They Mamash do the least. Let's go weiter. On the other hand, they say Slichot for 40 days, so it's good. Man the Amar Kol HaChodesh Kulai. Notes that's Rabbi Yehuda. He emphasizes the words Mechacha. Notes the Hishbat or Kol Mesoisa is the whole Chodesh. Man the Amar Kol HaShabbos Kula Gavaldi from Mishapsa. It's almost like Hosea saw in the future that there'll be a Machlekes Tanoim. He made everyone happy. He wrote all the 3 shittas here. Amar Rava Halacha Kirashbag. Now, Halacha Kirashbag, how would you teach it? Do what we're learning. Halacha Kirashbag, even after Tisha B'Av. No. Halacha Kirashbag, he meant not from Rosh Chodesh of, not until Rosh Chodesh Elul. Ve'amar Rav Halacha Kirav Meir. Now you get what he's saying? So what he means to say is, I'm picking the most lenient of both. David, like the Sfardim. It's Gavaldik. You see, you're Chacham, you speak to Chachamim. He's making us think a little bit. He said statements, they're not contradicting each other. What he meant to say is V'tarvayu l'kula. When Rava said in the public, we paskin like Rashbag, he didn't mean mamash like Rashbag. He meant not from Rosh Chodesh, not until Rosh Chodesh, Elul. Like Rabbi Yehuda. But he wanted to make it clear, but taka not like Rashbag. In other words, after Tisha B'Av, it ends. Who says it ends after Tisha B'Av itself? Rav Meir. That's what he meant when he said Allah Rav Meir. Vitzricha. If you would have said Allah Rav Meir, in other words, if Rabbi wanted to emphasize that the dinim of Avelus don't continue even on the week of Tisha B'Av, after Tisha B'Av, if he would have just said Allah Rav Meir, then you would think even from Rosh Chodesh. But that's not the way Rava paskin. That's why he said Allah Rashbag, to emphasize only this part of Rashbag. It doesn't begin with Rosh Chodesh. The extra Avelus begins. Now we have not the 3 weeks. This, you see how this came later. Here, there's no concept of Avelus of 3 weeks. No concept in our Gemara here. It's about one dinam Avelus and how much? The 3 shittas of Tanoim. If he only would have said Allah Rashbag, I would have thought Afilu La'achraf. That's why he said Allah Rav Meir, that it only begins on that week. And it ends with Tisha B'Av. Okay.
You could have just said halacha is also Shabbos Bilvad ad Taanis.
Yeah, but he wanted to quote Tanoim. Correct. And that's the way Rava did it. Okay, I agree with you. If Rava would have been speaking, if Rava would not have wanted for Talmidim to think, he would have said your words. He would have spoon-fed. They never spoon-fed. They made these statements to chop, I think, the attention, like what you're saying doesn't fit. And then you realize the Gemara is now deciphering what he said. Okay, weiter. Erev Tisha B'Av. That's our Mishnah concerning Su'udas HaMafsekes. That Erev Tisha B'Av, during the final meal, Lo Yerchel Adam Beis Tafshilin. But we have bread and an egg. That's not a problem. That's baked and cooked. That's fine. But you can't have two cooked dishes. By the way, we paskin that way. We don't eat. That's our minig. We have bread and we have the egg, not with the minig, with ashes. Exactly. We'll see details here. We're relatively lenient. So Amar Rav Yehuda lo yishanu ela m'shei shoy sulamayla. After halachic midday, shozmaniyus halachic midday. That is when you have these restrictions. Aval m'shei shoy ulamata. Ulamata means in the AM. Then you're not emuted. You can have 2 cooked dishes. You can have 10 cooked dishes. You don't have these restrictions. For Amar Rav Yehuda, another statement, and now we have to put them both together. That lo yishanu ela b'su'uda hamafsik. No, it's the meal in which you are concluding eating before the fast. That's where you have these restrictions. Aval b'su'uda she'ena mafsik mutter. What does it mean mutter? If you put these 2 statements together, what he's really saying is that even if you're eating after chatzos, if this is not your su'udas hamafsekes, you can also have 2 cooked dishes and more. And then v'travayu l'kula. These 2 statements put together, and you'll have the following leniency. In other words, you know what Rabbi Yehuda is saying? If you are having your su'udas hamafsekes in the AM, you can eat whatever you want, even if this is your final meal. If you're eating after chatzos, but this is not your su'udas hamafsekes, you have no restrictions. The restrictions of the Mishnah has to be both v'tarvayu l'kula. Which we are limiting the restrictions. If he only would have said then I would have thought that that if you are doing, for whatever reason, this guy wants to fast for who knows how many hours, so he's having his last meal 11 a.m. Rabbi Yehuda is saying, fine, if you're having it before halachic chatzos, eat whatever you want. Now we're going to learn later about meat and wine. There are other restrictions, and actually we don't have meat and wine during the whole 9 days. But the new additional restrictions of you can only have 2 tafshilin, that's number one is that's only if it's after chatzos. Then Komash Milon Mishei Shoy Sulamayla. Rabbi Yehuda made another statement that the restrictions are Mishei Shoy Sulamayla. But if that would have been the only thing he would have said, and once you're eating after in the PM hours and the halachic PM hours, you can't have 2 tafshilin. Komash Milon, that even after halachic midday, when may you not eat 2 tafshilin? Only b'suda mafsik. And Tanya kalishna kamo, right? The restrictions are only after midday. Tanya kalishna basra, it's only during the sudas hamafsekes itself. Tanya kalishna basra hasoy that of Tisha B'Av im asad lisa surah acheres. Then you know what? Mutar, listen to this. Lechol basar v'lishtei yain. This brisa did not have any restrictions regarding the 9 days, meat and wine. The restrictions was haircut and laundering. Ve'im lav, meaning this is your final meal before the fast. Then asur lechol basar v'lishtei yain. Now, by the way, how does that speak to the din of what we're talking about? We're not talking about meat and wine. We're speaking about 2 tafshilin because in our Mishnah on Daf Chavav, that the Rebbe puts it together. Since the Rebbe in our Mishnah put together, you can't have 2 tafshilin, you can't have wine and meat. So we take it as a given that these 2 dinim travel at the same time. So since this brisa says that if you are eating, but you plan to eat another meal, you can have meat and wine. So then you can have meat and chicken. You can have meat and, I don't know, cooked eggs. You can have 2 tafshilin, they go together. And also the Tanya Kalishna Kama. Lishna Kama here is about chatzos, or what Rabbi Yehuda calls Mishei Shoy Sulamayla, that Erev Tisha B'Av Lo Yoichal Adam Shnei Tafshilin, and also together Lo Yoichal Basar V'lishtei Yayin, and Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel Oimed, like we had on the Mishnah. No, you're not restricted, but Yeshana. Shana means you have to eat it differently. We'll see what he means. And Amar Rabbi Yehuda, what is the meaning of Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel that Yeshana? Yeshana means im shnei tafshilin, that then yochel minachot. But by the way, that means that if you normally have 5 tafshilin, then have 3 tafshilin. And Rashi writes, when you eat with a lot of people, there's a certain cover that you get. When people are eating with you, it's not that you're the groise knacker. Rashi writes, l'chabdoi, then eat with less people with you. So you're going to diminish your covet. It's interesting that there's something. Is it you have to cut it down 50%? Like, why doesn't he say 9 koises? I think once you have 9 koises, you can't stop yourself from having the 10th. I don't know what the. Okay. Oh, now comes the raya. All of this is only Mishei Shoy Sulamayla, Abel Mishei Shoy Sulamatom. Mutter. You know what mutter means? Again, even if this is your final meal, since it's before halachic chatzos, you have no such restrictions. Says the Gemara Vayta Tanya, Idoch Erev Tisha B'Av, Lo Yochal Odom Shnei Tafshilin during the Sudas HaMafsekes. Din number 2, like we learned in our Mishnah, they go together. Lo Yochal Basav Lo Yishtayayin. These are the words of Rebbe Meir. The Chachamim Oimrim, which is what we learned above, B'Shem Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, that yes, you can have, but Yishana and Umemayit. So here he writes 2 things. So according to this Chachamim, Yishana, before, how did Rabbi Yehuda explain Mishana? By being Memayit. Here the Chachamim are saying 2 dinim. Number 1, Yishana. Number 2, Memayit bebasar ubeyayin. Ketzat Memayit. He's saying more than before. Now, what would Yishana mean? I don't know. No, the Yishana of the Chachamim is not to eat less.
He eats a second cut brisket, now he's going to eat whatever, cheek meat.
So the Akira is suggesting the Yishana means he lowers the quality of the food. Kamus and Echos. Very good. That's what it means. Now, what's the Echos? Ketzat Memayit. I don't understand what's Kesad Mamayit. I understand what Mamayit means. Everyone knows how to diminish the quantity. Yishana is what needs to be explained. So he doesn't explain his Yishana, but what's Mamayit? That if you ate a liter of basar, yechel chatzi litra. I think what he's trying to say, chatzi litra, I think that a liter is a lot of meat. All he wants to point out is as long as you are eating less, even though it's a lot of meat, but you eat normal. You eat a 24 ounce. You're going to eat an 18 ounce. That's okay. It's as a juicy steak. You're a mamayit. You're still doing, again, and here he's saying 50%. Maybe it's meduyak. Maybe mamayit means to tell you it's not enough to take down 10%. Maybe that's the mamayit. Not my, I'll give a bad example. You eat a 24 ounce, eat a 12 ounce.
I probably was spacing out on something, but we're not talking about Shabbos.
We're talking about Erev Tisha B'Av Sudas HaMafsekes.
So how can we?
So I just pointed out that our sugya does not give restrictions regarding meat and wine during the 9 days. Not even Yakir, not even on Shabbos, Shechal, Tisha B'Av B'Toicha. Only on Sudas HaMafsekes if you're having it after midday. You know what? You know how it's so good to learn this because we practice Yiddishkeit the way we have to. We're bound. But now we see how it evolved. It evolved. It didn't begin that way. As time went on, we become more charedi. We're from. We're going to see our grandparents. Okay, weiter. Yochel chatzi litram. Hoye rogel lishtos loy giyayin. Yishta chatzi loy. Yeah, that's v'shkoyach shuki. That's it. Must mean that mamayit means not 10%. Mamayit means 50%. A 50% cut. Now, if you normally don't eat, then you can't say I'm being mishana. Oh, I'm going to have meat. I'm making a difference. No, then you also. If you normally eat dessert, what was the dessert? They had radishes, yummy. Or if they had the salty fish, then you can do it. It's dessert, so what? No, it's not taking away from Averos. Tanya idach. Kol shuhu bishum tisha b'av, meaning any meal that's eaten as your seudas hamafsekes. Asur lechol basar asur lishtes yayin. Now we're learning another detail. We spoke this out in the intro, that since you are eating your seudas hamafsekes, you are being makabel b'derech mamela avelus on yourself. So now you're eating, but from then on asur lircharts. However, kol she'enim mishum tisha b'av, even if it's after midday, you're having a meal. Not this is now I'm gonna farfast zeh. Mutalechel basar and mutalishtos yayin, and now we have a big machlekes in the gersois. And here it says still asur lirchotz. Wow. Or we're going to go with the Girsa from the Hagoy Sitziyunim, Umutar Lirchitz. No, it's the point is you're only Mekabel Taanis by Sudas Hamafsekes. If it's not Sudas Hamafsekes, if it's not Kol She'enoi Mishum Tisha B'Av, garnish, you have no restriction that you can't launder clothing. You can't take a haircut, but that's it. Rabbi Shmuel, but Rabbi Yosi, Mishum Aviv, in the name of his father, Rabbi Yosi, Kol Sha'a Shemuta Lechol. We're going to go with the Girsa, take out the word basar, it doesn't fit. Mutar Lirchitz. In other words, don't tell me that since you're Makabel Taanis, you're Makabel, since you're eating the Sudas Hamafsekes, you're being Makabel other dinim of it. No, the very fact that you can eat the Mutar Lirchitz. And by the way, we go that way. The dinim of Tisha B'Av begins by us, by Shkia. It doesn't begin by Sudas Hamafsekes, even though by Sudas Hamafsekes we have more restrictions. Tana Rabbanon, Kol, Mitzvahs Anagas Ba'evel, all the Dinei Avelos, and we'll leave that for Moed Katan, Noi Hagois, on Tisha B'Av. Now, which means, Asur, Ba'achila V'Shasiya, by the way, Avel is allowed to eat and drink. This is unique for Tisha B'Av. But the other dinim are connected to Avelos. Sicha, which is Asur for an Avel, Ne'ilas HaSandal, which is Asur for an Avel, Tashma Shamita, which is also for an Avel, the same thing on Tisha B'Av. And what's new now, you may not read, not Torah, not Nevi'im, not Kesuvim. You may not learn the Lishnois, learning the Mishnah, the Talmud, the Midrash, the Halachos, uba Agodois. Avol, however, this Tana holds that that if you are not familiar reading those parts of Tanach, which means that when you're reading it, you're breaking your teeth to get the Ivra correct. You are having tsar that you're not familiar with these words yet. Or if you're learning parts of the Torah Shabbat Peh that you never learned before, so you don't master it yet. So when you're harving to understand it, you're not understanding it yet. So you're having a certain amount of tsar, I'm not chapping it. So according to Rashi, the Isur of learning is connected to Mesamchi Lev. We're going to have time, God willing, we're going to read the Marsha argues with Rashi. But let's go with Rashi. So if the problem is it gives you simcha, makes sense. So if you're learning something that you are struggling with, you're not feeling simcha. You're feeling...
But then you'll get it.
So Shlem is saying, but then you'll get it.
Someone say that's most Shema.
That we'll see Machlekes Tanoim. So let's go. And another thing, those parts of Torah that deal with Avelus, you can learn. We go with this. The Koira, you can read the Kinois. You can read the Kinois Be'iyuv, because the Kinois that we have were not scripture. In other words, the Kinois part of Iyuv, you can read. Ubedvarim Haroyim Shebe Yirmiyah. Look at the words of Chazal, Bedvarim Haroyim. Now, next line, again, look how this question of Girsa, Minakotza Lakotza. Ubetinoike shall be Sraban, Vitinoike shall be Sraban, either Betelim, or the Gra says, Einon Betelim. Big difference. Can children learn Torah on Tisha B'Av? Depends how you read this. Mishum shenemar pekudei Hashem yisharem esamchei leiv. Okay. And Rashi he writes over here that this pasuk is not referring to the Tenoikos specifically. This pasuk is for everything that we learn. That the reason why one B'chlal should not be learning on Tisha B'Av is because Torah gives you simchas mesamchei leiv. Says the Marsha that this pasuk Pekudei Hashem Yisharem Mesamchei leiv is only referring to Tenoikos shel Beis Rabban. And the reason why adults are not allowed to learn is because when a person learns, they are distracted from the Avelos. And we have to be occupied during Tisha B'Av, at least until midday today of Tisha B'Av, in a way that we are not forgetting that it is a fast day. And that's going to lead us into the next sugya that we won't have time today. We'll learn it, God willing, tomorrow during the Siyum regarding working on Tisha B'Av. Rashi and Marsha says the reason why there's an Isur Malach on Tisha B'Av, working is difficult. Because when you're working, you're focused on your work and you are forgetting the morning. You're worried about the worker they didn't come, or the client that's not paying, or the production that didn't come out good. That's sad. but it's a hesach hadas mo'avelus. That's a very important machlokes. So again, Rashi connects learning. Yakid is laughing to Simchas Alev.
My stomach won't let me forget.
Huh?
I'm hungry. My stomach won't let me forget.
So Yakid is saying he doesn't forget because, and this is connected to the whole Masechta Taanis. We learned before that many people were not weakened by the fast. They were able to fast. So enachanami, you know. Okay, right. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, he argues with this concept that since you're not familiar with it, it brings you tzad. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, you'll have the greatest joy. And I'll tell you more, not because you will chap shleima, even before you chap. It's not a contradiction. We have the tzad that we're not getting it, but that type of exertion of trying to figure it out, deep down, the neshama is very happy because we're being a misyagea b'toira. You may not read scripture even b'makom she'eina rago liknos. Likewise, ve'eina shoyna even b'makom she'eina shago lishnos, because you have simcha together with the haravanya. Avol, but even according to Rabbi Yehuda, koyruhu be'iyuv ubekinois ubedvarim horem shebeyirmiyah. And here again, v'tinoikoi shel beis rabban. Here again, there's a machlekes and gersois. They are betelim boy. So children cannot. Let's just apply it to children. Children don't know avelos, but for them to be occupied in things that brings them joy, like with our kids, like we don't give them food. God forbid they're not allowed to fast. We learn to Yuma. Dafka chinuch only begins at a certain point. Before that, but to give them as a suda shloime b'shato is zoisloy because then it's a fast day. Okay. Huh?
Well, how is he touching?
Because if we're going with this gear, said that even though children don't know about avelus, but don't give them joyful activities. What's the joyful activity for children? Learning Torah. The simcha that we get from learning goes for children also. And by the way, Kishitas Rabbi Yehuda, it's not that children are jumping to learn. Halavai, they will. But even if it's difficult for them, but there's a joy, we all have that joy. After they went to our class, and then the teacher, with his wisdom, what did we learn? We learned in Taanis how we would bribe them. The teacher would give them his fish. But at the end of the class, they'll feel great. Don't do that on Tisha B'Av. We learned in a Braisa, Avol, it's hard, Avol, don't get confused. Here it's but. Avol, if basar is maliach, salty meat, that's not called basar. You can have yayin megito, a wine that's fresh, that's not called wine. That you can have. Like you guys, you can only have one tafshel. Say this, only have basar. So the question is, maliach hat kama. No, it's when you begin salting meat, in the beginning of the salting process, you can't say that this is already inferior. They would salt it for preservation purposes. And like Danny always says, he has a lot of knowledge with the salty meat. I think it's called jerky, meat jerkies. You can ask Danny later about the meat jerkies. So at that point, you can have that. That's not called meat. So at kama. So Amar Abchinana Bar Kahana B'Shmei Shmuel Kol Zman. Now we're going to take out the word she'eino. We're going to read Girsas Rashi. I'm reading Rashi 12 lines from the bottom. Kol Zman, that shohu kishlamim. What's a shlamim? Rashi teaches that shlamim may be eaten for 2 days and 1 night. Take that time period. If you put meat and salt to preserve it, if it was not sitting in that salt for 2 days and 1 night, then even though it's very salty, it's not yet basar muliach. It's basar. You cannot eat it during Surah Samavsekes. Only after it was sitting in the salt for the time that you are allowed to eat a shlamim, 2 days and 1 night, then, that's according to our Tana, that's already not called superior meat, and you can have that even on Surah Samavsekes. Likewise, v'yayin megitoy ad kama. Here we're going in the opposite direction. In other words, meat begins asur, and it becomes mutter after a certain amount of time. Wine goes in the punkt fakir. Wine begins, it's too fresh. It's not good yet. It's not chashuv yet. When does it become asur? Calls mancha, who toy says when it's fermenting, whoever saw making wine, when it's bubbling, it's not called good wine yet. And you are allowed to have it even by Surah Samavsekes. Tana, not only that, the ayin that's toisis is not also because of gilui. The sugi of gilui is that nechashim and akrabim, they might drink from it, and then while they drink, they might deposit some venom. That's al pi nigla, al pi chasidus, there are other ruchnis dikenyanim. Wine that's still fermenting is a wine that nechashim ba'akrabim won't drink from. So even if it was left uncovered, you are allowed to drink from it. The kama tisi sasoi. How long does it take for wine to ferment? 3 days. After 3 days, if it's fermenting, the Torah tells you it's not fermenting. It's not called fermenting. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Marav. Kach hoya min hagoy shal Rabbi Yehuda, the great Rabbi Yehuda, Stam Rabbi Yehuda, you should know, is Rabbi Yehuda ben Rabbi Loi, right? The Rosh Hamadabrim, right? The Talmud of Rabbi Akiva. And by the way, this is about Suras HaMafsekes, that Erev Tisha B'Av by Suras HaMafsekes, just adding those words because that's the pshat over here. He would only have dry bread with salt, and the Yoshev Daflaman on the base. Where would he sit? Ben Kanur Likirayim, Rashi says that the least hygienic part of one's home was by the oven stove. Because when you're baking, when you're cooking, the oil is spritzing. In other words, it wasn't just about not eating, diminishing the meat. He wouldn't eat meat. He would have pas b'melach and pas chareva. The way Rav Nissen made sure in the yeshiva over there, they used to buy bread. In Brinawad, they would never give fresh bread to the bachram. God forbid, that's a taivas. Wait until, not moldy, no, because they were moderate. They would wait until it would get dry, and then you would have it. B'melach, he did it always out of Tisha B'Av, and you would sit in Tanach and v'oichel. And what type of liquid did he drink? Not he drank yayin v'gita. He drank water. V'shoysa aleh kitan shamayim, and he drank a container of water. By the way, that drinking liquid is so important, not to get dehydrated. And and let's go another line over here. So Tanan Hassan, like we mentioned above, that's the marsha connecting these two sugyas. I want to hop on at least another few lines. That there is an issue of simcha. The marsha says the issue of learning Torah is not because of simcha. It's because of you being distracted from the morning. The pasuk that was brought in the Braisa Shuki, according to the marsha, was only for children. Children are not mourning, but don't teach them for them to be joyful. So can you work on Tisha B'Av? Now, when we're saying you're not allowed to work, no one is saying that it's like Shabbos and Yom Tov. We're speaking what we call work. Can you go to work on Tisha B'Av? So it depends on the minute. However, a Talmud Chacham should even to go to work. You don't go to work. And again, the issue of going to work or not is about hesach hadas. What happens when you work is that you are distracted from the times. Now, we mamish had this on Daf Yud Amud Beis. It's beautiful how we're being makasher. It's called maskifin, the siyum and the haschala. As we say the nusach over there on Simchas Torah. Maskifin, aschalta, imashlamta. Because we learned, if you remember, about can a person behave like a yachid when it comes to the fast? Can you behave like a Talmud? So we had above, and Daf Yud Amud Beis, Rashbak says that for inyanim of tsar, gesundheit. If it's not inyanim shel tsar, then there's sometimes mechsa kiyura, you're boasting. But this is about fasting, about not working. Not working brings you more tsar because you're not distracted. Rashbak says, Lo oilam yasa adam atzmai ki talmud chacham. Let's stop over here to be continued. And again, the issue is about Hesach Hadas, and we're going to have a very big statement to be continued, and God willing, tomorrow we will make the siyum on Taanis.
Rabbi, Indian, my bris was on Tisha B'Av, and they didn't know what to name it. The Soda was the night of Tisha B'Av, and the Rebbe sent a note to my father that Mashiach Tzemach Shmei v'Menachem Shmei, because it says in the Midrash that he's supposed to name after Mashiach if the bris is on Tisha B'Av.
Wow,
just yeah, Mashiach Tzemach Shmei v'Menachem Shmei.
Guys, can you imagine if Tzemach?
Yeah, Tzemach.
Oh my God. Oy, gewalt.
Maybe Tzemach's Mashiach.
Yeah, I got break the places I need. Have a good day.
Rabbi?
Thank you. Great share.
The issue of lishnois b'makom she'eno ragil, I assume we pass him like Rabbi Yehuda.
We don't pass him. We pass him like Rabbi Yehuda. I'll tell you why. Because we're not ruggle in anything. If we would pass him like the Tanakama, we would sit and learn the whole Tisha B'Av. And another thing to say that there were great Gedolah Yisrael that would sit and learn on Tisha B'Av. They wouldn't do it in public. And one of the lags, Al Pinigla, they would stand on is like the Shita. They would argue that they're not Ragol Lishnis. They don't know enough yet. The biggest giants. We know we have these stories that they would learn on Tisha B'Av, and then there one time a Talmud caught his teacher sitting learning on Tisha B'Av. Tell the student that when God, after 120, when he's going to be punished for that, he knows that he's on an easy street already. That is his big Aveda. All
Thank
right.
you,